Damn it, I think technology is weird with me. I don't know what it is. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Game Changer Podcast, the first official podcast back. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Nate the effing Great, and with me is the lovely, the incomparable, the very charismatic Tori Clark. Tori, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good myself. We're starting with the Italian accents. We're not offending anybody. We just like Joey Tribbiani. What can we say?
Just here for the friends.
I like it. I like it. We're starting off strong. So, ladies and gentlemen, we decided to do something that hasn't really been talked about too much, but it feels like something we could definitely cover. And that's going to be going through the different eras of Disney. We're going to be starting off strong with the Golden Era, specifically the first two movies that came out, which were Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and Pinocchio. Obviously, us being as quote unquote experienced, old, fill in the blank, whatever you feel like you want to put here. We've actually grew up with quite a few of these. Now, did we see these when they first came out? No, I don't think we were even a thought process when these movies first came out. But these definitely were movies that we had either good memories about them, bad, or just no memories at all. So I also wanted to talk about this because of the fact that there's actually some interesting notes, especially when it comes to the first movie that was released from Disney back in. Let me get this note here. Actually, this is where the crazy part is. It actually had two release dates. December 21st, 1937 at the Carthay Circle Theater, which I will look up the location for that. I'm sure that's either still around or okay, it's in LA.
I
And it was
think, yeah.
demolished in 1969. Well, that's just sad now. And
Can't go live. I can't go live from
no, no, I can't.
there.
That's really sad. And it was released to the United States general public in February 4th of 1938. Had a budget of $1.5 million and made a box office of $418 million. So we're going to get into our general thoughts about Snow White in just a minute. One of the things I definitely wanted to talk about is how this kind of all started because Disney beforehand, they really did a lot of the animated shorts known as Silly Symphonies. And honestly, I've watched quite a few of them, and some of them are still pretty good. Some of them are kind of like, what were they thinking with this thing? But for the most part, they're memorable, they're colorful, they're fun to listen to. Do you remember any Silly Symphonies growing up?
I think Steamboat Willie is the only one I can think of, right?
Uh,
Is that
that
what?
that is, I think that was one of the earlier ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the only one that I like with Mickey whistling down the river on a steamboat and shenanigans happen. But I think it's also part of one of the new Disney kind of graphics that come up at the beginning. It's like,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then like you see him like kind of like driving the boat, and then it ends up like Walt Disney Pictures or something. Like I don't know if you recognize that from any of like the probably like not new. I mean, probably like from Up or things like that, like back in
Oh
that
yeah.
day.
Oh yeah, no, they have the deal where they almost do like the weird I'm trying to figure out exactly how they put this. That kind of deal where they have like drawings on every page and when you go fast it just kind of makes like the
Yeah.
picture going. Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah,
talking
yeah, like
about.
the old anime. I think it's actually called not Walt Disney Pictures. I think it's Disney Animation they call it because
Yeah.
that is like the that would be all of that is the beginning of animation. But yeah, I definitely remember seeing them.
So Walt decided to take a chance and make an actual full-length feature film. And from what my research was gathering was that it was between three different movies. It was between Snow White, Pinocchio, or Alice in Wonderland. But with the Alice in Wonderland one, they were actually thinking about doing it as a live action movie. But unfortunately, Paramount beat them to the punch and they were saying, like, yeah, we're not giving you the rights to this. So better luck next time. So eventually they wound up with Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, which some people might also think, well, why would Walt Disney do that? Well, I'm actually going to give you a quote from what Walt Disney had to say as to why he picked this out. So this was when the movie was first coming out and why he chose it. He said, and I quote, "I don't know why I picked Snow White. It's a thing I remembered as a kid. I saw uh, Mar Marguerite, I believe is the name, Marguerite Clark, in it in Kansas City one time when I was a newsboy. They had a big showing for all the newsboys. I went and I saw Snow White. It was probably one of my first big feature pictures I'd ever seen. That was back in 1916 or something, somewhere way back. But anyways, to me, I thought it was the perfect story. I had the sympathetic dwarves and things. I had the prince and the girl, the romance. I had the heavy. I just thought it was the perfect story. End quote. And obviously, some of these things are coming from a bit of darker tales. And one of the things that we know is that Disney likes to kind of fluff up some of these darker tales. But in all honesty, we go into talking about the movie itself, it still has enough dark matters to really classify it as one of those things where it's like, wait, you allowed kids to come and watch that? For us, we're like, yeah, that's what made us tougher, really. And nowadays it's just like, I don't know if I could expose my kids to this. It's like, oh, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? They'll probably wet the bed. Maybe wait till they're older, just a little bit.
Maybe, yeah. I don't even, yeah, the ratings systems obviously were different back then than they are now because everything's different. You have to adjust. But that was one thing I think when we were first starting to talk about Disney, I was like, yeah, the things they allowed back even only like 20 years ago compared to now are like, whoa.
Yeah, no, I think I remember us talking like I'll use this prime example is that Tarzan when it first came out, it was just rated G. And obviously with the dark stuff that we'll talk about when we get to talk about that, it's one of those things where it's like, nowadays I think that would either be more of a PG, maybe PG-13 kind of deal because woof, it is definitely one of those movies that should not be watched by kids alone, especially.
Yeah, it can get kind of dark. Dead bodies equal dark to me.
You got that right. So with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, rewatching it, it was one of those things where I could see so many people nitpicking about some of the items that were involved. Like obviously they're saying like, oh, Snow White is of this age, the prince is of this age, and that's something that'll just continue to just haunt us for the rest of our days. For me, I just watched this, I'm thinking, okay, just think of it more as somebody who's watching it for the first time back in 1938. And the other thing that I kept thinking to myself was, okay, I also watch Game of Thrones. So some of these things are not exactly one of those things where it's like ewy kind of deal because I'm thinking to myself, they don't label them with age or anything like that. So we're just gonna leave that one be. But also some of the things from Game of Thrones, I'm like, okay, this I can honestly see this happening in that time frame. But I'm ranting on. So, basic story is that there's an evil queen who wants to be the fairest one of all. And unfortunately, she comes to find out that even though she basically sent her stepdaughter to be this maiden, she grew to be a beautiful maiden. And according to the mirror, being the most fairest one of all. And also, side note here, I just wanted to say that I would have loved if there just came a point where that mirror was just like, can we talk about something else? I mean, every day it's the same thing. Are you the fairest of all? You fairest of all. Can we just talk about the weather or something like that? I feel like, come on, just give me something challenging.
I always think of like the different wordplay like that they could have on like the fairest, like what does that even mean? Like the fairest ruler, the most righteous queen of all, or Snow White, the lightest skin of all. Like,
That, that is the weird part. I actually do remember that. The first thing that he was
yeah.
saying, like rose, red, lips red as the rose, skin white as snow. I'm like, wow, this writing actually went through. This is
Right.
so basically we're saying, and I'm not trying to disrespect it, but he's like basically we're saying she's goth apparently. But
She's a vampire, and that's
oh, there we
where
go.
this whole thing is just rigged. It's always been about vampires. Nobody knew. You're welcome. Podcast over. Snow White's a vampire.
Oh my gosh, if that was a twist for a Snow White movie, that would just be amazing now that I think about it.
But it wouldn't be bad. It
No.
wouldn't be bad.
Hey, something new, Disney. Just saying. Um, so she meets the prince for the first time. The queen wants to have her killed off. Snow White runs into the forest, meets him, runs across a cottage that is owned by seven dwarves, seven miners. They meet up, and I almost said the Snow Queen. I'm like, no, this is the wrong movie. The queen finds out that Snow White is alive, plans on killing her herself, but through a disguise. And she does through a poison apple. And in the end, it's true love's kiss that wins the day, and happy endings, everything like that. So it's a very simple story that, in all honesty, watching it back, I'm like, this movie still holds up as a pretty good movie. And there are so many moments where I'm either just kind of like, okay, songs are still really good. I'm not getting annoyed by anybody. There's not any kind of like, oh man, that like an eye rolled kind of moment or just a face palm, like, gosh, why is this even happening? It's just a simple story that people can just sit back and kind of enjoy, in all honesty. But that's kind of like the general first impressions when it comes to the movie. So what were your thoughts when it comes to Snow White? I mean, I know you mentioned that it's not one of those hierarchies, but you have to admit that there has to be something there that really made it kind of still stand out as one of the best, honestly.
I mean, for the first ever like Disney kind of like main animation and main feature film, I think it's definitely held up and over time. It's a great movie. Just wasn't my personal favorite in general. I think it had something to do with her voice, and that's something I think people will commonly talk about is that Disney the voices of the princess through the times and how the voices changed, like frequency wise. Like Snow White, they're very light, soft, high as it can be. Snow White's voice is as high as possible, which is, reflecting the time and what was comfortable at the time was like women had the high, soft, very feminine never going against the grain. Everything needed to be agreed upon. Oh, like very like lyrically almost like that. And like even when she talks to animals and everything, like it's just one of those things that you're like, interesting that this is how she sounded and this is what they wanted to portray the first ever princess like was very floral, light, as feminine as possible. And voices of the princesses get deeper and deeper when they come back to more of a typical speak that we have now. Like I don't change my voice ever. Like I mean, some people, phone voice, like hi, but there's something to be said on just like how old the film is and where like I didn't enjoy how high her voice was.
No, that I think that's fair, and I think that's going to also come into play when we talk about Pinocchio for me. But we'll get to that in a bit. Um, Another thing I really like about this movie is that I feel like everybody's pretty developed in this movie, and I mean that in the sense of they're not just person A, person B, person C. It's just like Snow White. She's obviously a princess who has great voice. She's kind of naive, but at the same time, she can be stern at certain points. Um, you have the dwarves, each of them, of course, they have their own personalities. I mean, it's in their names. If you haven't figured out what their personalities are by their names, then you probably need to rewatch the movie again, which I have no issue with. The queen has her own personality. Honestly, I even look back and I thought to myself, man, even the huntsman has a really good personality, even though he has like five lines in the entire movie. He literally goes from just, being loyal to thinking like, I don't know if I want to do this, to going to like regret. He has like a range of emotions in those five lines, and it's pretty good. Probably the only one that suffers the most from it is the prince because he only gets maybe at most three lines in one song, but that's about it. So to your point, they definitely focus a lot more on the women in this movie, which it's pretty awesome to have that kind of deal where it's like, oh, well, it's all about the seven dwarves. I guarantee you that about 75% of this movie deals more with Snow White and the Queen than the dwarves themselves. The dwarves, they get their camera time, no denying that, but the women definitely get more of a screen time when it comes to that. And the fact that I had to look this up, that the woman who played the Queen also voiced the peddler, the witch when she made the transformation. I was literally like, man, that's a really good voice range to have that to go from being a very soft but stern and very vindictive voice to this just crazy, out of control, kind of just maniacal old woman who just goes, a perfect disguise. I'm like,
Yes.
holy shit, this is good. This is a good villain. I don't care what anyone says. This is a good voice actress. She knew the mission when she came in.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's cool to know that she played both voices, like, but also great. You should be able to. Like that like if you're that's my character, I'd want to do all the voices for it too.
So, as far as other things that we liked about this movie, I'll definitely say this, that the scene where they have the um where they're about to eat supper and she and Snow White tells them to go wash and they show they show their hands to her. It's just so funny seeing how everybody has their own kind of deals. Like Doc just shows his hands. Sleepy and Bashful, they're just kind of showing their hands. Happy actually tries to like rub his hands on his side to clean it up, probably making it more worse than anything. And of course, there's Dopey who just literally just goes, "Here are my hands." Now they're covered up.
So cute. I remember that scene too. I like kind of how the seven dwarves are like emotions of some sort. So it's like little like children like emotion like they all have. So you get to see how she handles all those personalities. But yeah, I think it's really funny to watch them all have filthy hands and how they decided to live and how it's another kind of a masculine feminine thing. They were children, but very masculine children of this is we work, we do this and we do this. And then she's like, what if we cleaned and make it nice and then I could give a meal for it? And they're like, whoa, this is kind of nice.
It is kind of one of those realistic things when it comes to movies where these guys they have their own status quo where it's just kind of, point A, point B, point C. Now, obviously, with Snow White being here, it's like point A, but there's also a branch that goes in a different direction for point B. And I think it also goes out saying one of the best scenes in there is when they first see the house and they're just like, it's all clean. The floor's clean. The cobwebs are gone. Them mentioning the cobwebs, I'm like, are you kidding me? You're gonna talk about that among everything else. And I think Bashful even had a moment where he was just like, my cup is clean. Sugar is gone.
Yes, like it's the intruder that they had was like, how dare she intrude or somebody intruded on us and all of our mess, the mess that we put there that we meant to put there. And it's just there's a lot of different mindful things you can think about that of like, oh yes, they choose to live like this. We choose that. How dare she remove our spiders?
Right. Sure, they were bothering us, but there was a reason why we had them there. It's fine.
Yeah, we could have done it. We chose not to. So it's intruding.
But it obviously does also go that they're also not used to having, women around. So with them getting
Mhm.
this attention from this woman, it's been really nice for them. And I will also say this, that one of the things I would love to see in the live action one, and this is more likely not going to happen because we've seen a lot of them become, you know, cookie cutouts of basically what the original was, but just live action. One thing I would kind of love to see is that one thing they do really well in this movie is the relationship between Snow White and Grumpy. Because right off the bat, he is literally just like, huh, women, they don't deserve to be here. She doesn't deserve to be here. Oh, let her get out of here. She doesn't need to be. Yeah, and then by the end of it, he is one of the most emotional about the fact that she is gone, she is dead. And you see little touches where he's starting to like warm up to her. And it starts with that following morning where she's doing the whole like, kissing everybody on the forehead, saying, "Y'all see you tonight." And he takes off his hat and he kind of shines his own head just to make sure that it's fine. And then of course he's just playing it off like, "Now I warn you, don't let nobody in the house." And
Yeah.
she, and of course he gets the peck on the head, and that's where he just goes from being grumpy to just having that small, weak smile of just being like, that felt nice. So what I'm getting at is that I would much rather see Snow White end up with Grumpy at the end of the movie instead of the prince, which is a huge gamble, I know. But at the same time, if they played it off the way that they did in this movie, where they kind of built that relationship up, I think they could somehow do it. I mean, it's almost like going into the direction of Frozen. You think like, oh, well, Anna's going to end up with Hans. In the end, she ends up with Kristoff. They can do it. They can do it. Do I have faith in them that they'll do it right? Not exactly. I mean, the last movie did not really give me that much confidence, but it's one of those things where like they've done it in the past. They can do something different with it. It would just be an interesting idea, but I've been droning
Yeah.
on and on, so
No, no, no. That would be very interesting. So there's no prince. Instead, like she's just in a reverse harem of seven dwarfs are all up for grabs for her. I'm down. I've watched harem, like reverse harem animes, like no other. It's one of my favorites. So
it'd almost be like a medieval version of like The Bachelor, where she's
yeah,
just having
that's
moments with these seven
funny.
men, and then it's almost like this final rose ceremony where they were just like, where she
Final apple ceremony.
ah, what are you trying to do? Poison me? No, I'm just giving you an apple. Oh, okay.
That would be funny though. It would definitely switch it up and it would give some good tension and chemistry. Like I always love, like a grumpy, I don't want anything to do with you, and to the, oh no, she warmed my heart.
Like I said, it's just one of those relationships where is it one that some people are going to get behind at first? Probably not, but you tell good storytelling and you give these characters a good, you know, you know, give them good qualities. I mean, obviously, some people are going to say like, "Well, Snow White is kind of flawed," and it's like I can see where somebody could say that. I think the scene where she's doing the prayer at the bed, where she says, "Please make a Grumpy like me." It's one of those things like, "Oh, come on, you shouldn't have to care about that. You got six other guys that like you. Why are you so concerned about this one guy? Eventually, he's going to like you. Just come on."
Right, right. Like not everybody has to like you. Come on. Like stop being such a people pleaser, Snow White. I love
But
it.
can't, but can't help it. Needs to be loved by everybody.
Jeez, don't I know it? I love to be loved by everybody. Are you kidding me? But perfectionism just doesn't work.
It
Doesn't
just
work.
it doesn't work out that way. So, final thoughts when it comes to Snow White. It's still, like I said, a movie that still holds up. It does have the creepy imagery like the Grimm brothers would probably want it to have. It has a very easy story to follow. Once you get past like all of the like, and honestly, that's the thing about it, is that this movie has flaws, but they're like really, really tiny. There's not one where I'm just like, that is a horrible flaw. It's just like, these things are just, they're small. They're not that big a deal to me.
Yeah. No, I think overall it's a great classic Disney. I mean, the way they were able to restore it vocally or sound wise, soundscape it, whatever you want to call it, um, I think is incredible and just really cool that they have the technology to show something that is oh, I mean, over like almost 85, 90 years old now. Like, oh my gosh, it's
I
super
mean,
old.
it is super old. It is amazing. It is amazing really thinking about that. It's like we're harping about a movie that's almost 90
Almost
plus
a
years.
hundred years old.
It is crazy at this point, but it is one of those things where it shows that hey, Sometimes you just need a really good story with really good characters, and that'll help stand the test of time. Which is an interesting segue, considering we're talking now about Pinocchio, the second feature-length film that Disney came out with. And whew, I'm gonna say this. Rewatching this movie, I was just kind of like, wow, this has its moments where it's good, but okay, let me put it in perspective, ladies and gentlemen, that back then this was one of those movies that obviously a lot of people really enjoyed. I mean, going to the statistics right here, we have that it came out at the Center Theater in February 7th, 1940. And about, looks like 2 weeks later. Yep, 2 weeks later is when they released it to the general public. Budget of $2.6 million, box
Wow.
office of $164 million. So this is another movie that hit something right, and people wanted to see this movie. You know, and I can understand why. It's a really another simple story about how an old man Geppetto, he just wants to have, he wants to kind of have this fulfillment in his life, and he believes that this little marionette puppet would come to life and be a real boy eventually. And Blue Fairy comes in, gives the puppet life, and basically the puppet has to find. I think I'm trying to remember. It was a brave, truthful, unselfish, and then he becomes a real boy. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, well, Geppetto started this wish. Now the puppet has to kind of finish the wish, which already in and of itself, it makes me kind of scratch my head. But it's one of those things that, again, not trying to think too hard on it, at least not at the start. The little boy this little puppet goes on adventures, is coerced by temptations to be an actor and also temptations to uh, go to a temptatious island known as Pleasure Island, and in the end has to save his father from a whale, which, again, gonna get to that. uh, Ultimately finds a way to become a real boy. So I will say this. I think I remember watching this quite a bit as a kid. For me, as an adult, rewatching this, uh, I think I think it trails back to what you were saying about how with how Snow White, her voice can kind of get a little annoying at times. This is probably the Snow White for me because there are so many times where I'm just hearing Pinocchio talk about Johnny G. Willikers. I'm gonna be a real boy. Just hearing that high squeaky voice, I'm just like, oh boy. Go to Chandler mocking saying, "Look, Geppetto, I'm a real live boy. Once I was a little boy, a little wooden boy." I'm like, I much rather watch that version. I
Yeah,
just
they did have a live action too, like even back in the day too, like in the 90s or something, which crazy.
Yeah, they had a lot of stuff for Pinocchio. I think in one year they had like three different interpretations of Pinocchio. One
Mm.
by Disney, the other two by random deals. Actually, one I think I remember watching with Shanta Celeste. We watched
Oh, really?
I think we watched the Guillermo Montoya one that was
Oh,
on Netflix.
Guillermo del Toro?
So, yeah.
Oh yeah, like he's probably looked evil.
Um I I don't know what to tell you because honestly I don't have any memories of that movie. It's like, wow, this so I think that Pinocchio is one of those stories where it's kind of all the same and there's not much you can really add on to it, really. I think that's really how I can put it as like Pinocchio as a whole.
Yeah.
This version here, it's the flag bearer, but at the same time, it's not saying much in my opinion.
I mean, I guess I guess right. Everybody has their own perspective. The Pinocchio story is like the typical young hero story to me.
Mhm.
Is this hero wishes to be something of himself, almost like every Disney movie does this. Like it's like the hero's journey, something has to initially happen to them, and for him, he is born as a puppet. like which is like a lot of times in the Disney stories, it's their father dies, their mom dies, oh, they're an orphan or this or that. So he is like, I'm not even real. But, again, perspective wise, you could see that. And his journey is to become a man slash boy, whatever you want to say it. And in order to do that, he needs these value systems to prove that you're a true person, like that you can be real. And throughout his journey, he goes to seek this and gets thrown into these random tasks where he just proves that he already had it to begin with. And then boom, everything is fine. And I think that's the cute story of Pinocchio, is that you go to find greener grass to realize you've always had it yourself or something. Like it was in you the whole time, which, you know, has so much truth behind it. And that's an interesting statement within itself, is that what you're looking for is always truthfully in you. You just have to discover a perspective of seeing it. And I think that's what the Pinocchio story is all about. But it's also one of those wacky adventures that, like, I haven't seen Pinocchio in so long. But I know, like, everything I know about Pinocchio is if he tells a lie, his nose will grow. So it's a very obvious, like, you can't tell a lie. Like, a lot of strong moral values are written within Pinocchio. And, like, the whale eating you and stuff and that whole, there's just so much stuff that, like, is just a very uh like flagship of what Pinocchio is to people, is like, oh, like a whale, when whales eat people, like, oh, it's never been done that before. Oh, right, Pinocchio. Like, even I watched Finding Nemo and I'm like, oh, here comes the whale part, just like Pinocchio. It's just one of those things that, like, it's very notariable, like, like Pinocchio, but, like, you don't like, I don't remember it. Like Jiminy Cricket, like, you're conscious, like, I'm your conscious. Even that is like such a, like, a like, his story is just in his, it could be just in his mind of an actual real boy who has a dream that he was a puppet and he has to figure all this stuff out. And there's just so much stuff that I see that it is very good, like, morally, and if you're an adult you get it. And I think that's kind of the main point about Disney that we like in general, is like, you can get it differently as an adult, but you don't have to. And you also don't have to, like, it's not very entertaining sometimes. It was more entertaining as a kid. Like, I remember there was like a wolf or something in it at one point. I mean, I couldn't
Yeah.
tell you all the characters. Like, I couldn't.
Oh, I could because I recently just watched it, like I said.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I will say that I think Jiminy Cricket has his moments, but there were definitely a lot of moments where he's kind of one of those characters where it's like, okay, okay, maybe we could see a little less of you sometime. At the same time, they do
Mm.
give him a little less, but um yeah, you mentioned the like the side characters. Honestly, those are kind of like my favorite parts of the movie are a fox and a cat, Honest John and
Oh,
Gideon,
there we go.
who who assist Pinocchio into the direction of temptation. And it's one of those weird things where I look back at this and I think to myself, honestly, I would love a spin-off with Honest John and Gideon, like how they came to be, where they have such little screen time again, but they make that kind of impact where it's like, I kind of want to know more, because there comes a
Mhm.
point where at first they're just like, oh, we're going to sell Pinocchio to Stromboli. And then they make this deal with a coachman to bring naughty little boys to Pleasure Island. And there's a point where Honest John's even just like, I don't know how I feel about this. And he's intimidated by the coachman, who honestly is the true villain of this movie. Oh my God. That point where he says, they don't come back as boys. And he just has this devilish look on his face. I'm just like, oh, yeah, he is the true villain. Stromboli was definitely the minor villain. He's the lead villain in this entire thing.
Creepy.
Oh, got creepy. That that is also Stromboli and Coachman in a nutshell. Stromboli is just like, oh, you're going to make me big time money. Oh, hey, we started with an Italian accent. There we go. Now we got it. Now it comes full circle.
Geppetto and Pinocchio. Obviously it had to be
Yeah,
an Italian
just
accent.
say, say you're going to make me big money, and then when you can't, you will be firewood. And he just throws an axe at a puppet. I'm like, well, that's a little grim for a kids movie, somewhat kids movie, I guess. And then, of course, with the Coachman, where he basically takes these kids to Pleasure Island and they become donkeys. Even
Oh
there.
yeah.
Also, also, can we state the fact that this kind of amazing that a G-rated movie has the word jackass in it?
Right. But and also, it wasn't a swear. It was like
No,
that's what
no.
that is. But like I get that it's a swear to us and like nowadays. Um, but even all those it's all like, play on like adulthood. If you catch the drift of what they were saying,
Yes.
like yeah, like I mean, like he's like saying like if you don't make money, you're worthless. And like this is if you just become one of the herd, just come one of the herd, just become a donkey, just be an ass. And like you'll fit in fine. But it's like, like it doesn't work. It doesn't work. Be your own man, Pinocchio. Become a true boy.
Yeah, it's just really crazy thinking about how I think that we had like a bit of a lighter dark tone in Snow White. Pinocchio does not pull back. I mean, you literally
Yeah.
have the whole deal, like I said, where a puppet literally gets axed in a show, and then you see a kid turning into a donkey during this, and probably one of the most terrifying visuals I've honestly ever seen. I look back at that and I think to myself, geez, this is really dark, and this is also Disney, which makes this absolutely amazing. But
Yeah. And it was a bad kid, right?
yeah, it
Like
was Lampwick.
yeah, which was like yeah, like he's like not a good kid. He's always kind of been a bully to Pinocchio and to the other kids. Again, remember I haven't seen it for a second, so I could
Right.
be wrong. Um, and then like you watch him like get punished and like, haha, like this is what we do to those who like you're gonna be next. Like this is what true boys will like turn into this. And you're like, oh. I guess not. Don't go to Pleasure Island, which is also a very I find very funny for the name in the sense of like you can't have too much good in your life or you become an ass. Like you're like, what?
Oh, that's really good and deep. I like that.
Like what?
Because
Really?
yeah, it because yeah, I mean some of the things that they had in there was like smashing glass or smoking cigarettes and drinking, I guess, but I don't know if it was beer, if it was just like
It
some
was
kind of like so
probably poison, but that means like liquor probably.
gotcha, gotcha.
Yeah, most likely because again, the like in the 40s there were I mean the 40s I think the you could drink again, but right, you're learning lessons. You're trying to learn life lessons here. Nate, learn the life lessons.
Yes, I believe that there came a point where Pinocchio is just like, gotta learn to be a real boy and be a good boy. Ain't that right, Nate? He just looks directly at me. I'm like, it's breaking the fourth wall.
I'm scared.
I only like this in Deadpool. Thank you. You're not Ryan Reynolds. Please stop looking at me with those dead, lifeless eyes.
Oh God, yeah. Ugh. Yeah, I couldn't watch a live action of Pinocchio now that they would try to like be like Coraline or something with button eyes. Ugh,
Oh man, I definitely see that being a problem.
wouldn't like
Um,
it.
so the other thing that was kind of an interesting thing was the whole deal with the whale, where it's like, okay, first of all, how did Geppetto end up in the whale, and how is this whale? I will say that this whale definitely had quite the I honestly, before we had Jaws, Monstro was definitely the one thing where we were just like, I don't know if I want to swim in the ocean because if there's something like that living in there, that's crazy. And the crazy thing about Disney is that sometimes you don't need an explanation as to why things happen. Like, why is this whale continuing to, hunt down Geppetto and Pinocchio? It's like, well, now it's out of your system. You don't have to worry about it. No, I must still eat them. Why though? Because fair enough. Disney, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, I wonder what the because again, I'm not as familiar with Pinocchio, but I wonder what the lesson is there. Like what does the whale represent in Pinocchio? I don't remember. I can't recall, but it must represent some sort of life lesson, and the fact that they have to face it together, like that challenge together is
Yeah, maybe that was just not one that had a lesson behind it. Maybe it was just one where it was just like, we need to end this on a cool note. Giant whale, cool. So we just have this going after it. Why is the whale chasing them? No reason. Fair enough. Make the whale nice and creepy. I think we could do that. We'll make it big. Perfect. Perfect.
make it big.
Make it a big one. Like we need like a big monster. You know what? Oh, we can call it monster, but let's make it more menacing. Monstro. There we go.
Monstro.
Monstro. You know what? It sounds Italian, so it makes sense probably.
Yep. I mean, it is an Italian based film. Not film,
It
but
is
a
true.
story. So, Monstro.
So I think the other critique I kind of have with this movie is that when Geppetto and Pinocchio reunite, I kind of feel like Geppetto's a little bit too nice to Pinocchio. I get it. It's supposed to be one of those things where, he's a loving father and stuff like that. But at the same time, there could have been a moment where, Pinocchio, admits, I've done so much wrong, Dad. I did not mean to worry you. I'm sorry, that kind of deal. We never really get that moment. It's just kind of one of those things where Pinocchio, he kind of starts going that direction. And then Geppetto's just like, oh, it doesn't matter. You're here, my little boy. And I'm just like, let him apologize. Don't do this to him. Because then he's gonna end up at Pleasure Island as a jackass. Don't do it. But
Yeah.
that's
Uh,
another nitpick.
yeah. So I wanted to just really quick, like, since I couldn't get my thought process wrapped around what the whale is, they say that the whale would represent God's love and forgiveness because that's what happens. Geppetto gets swallowed up by it when he's out looking for Pinocchio. And Pinocchio went out looking to, make his father happy, type of thing. Like, I want to be a real boy because dad always wanted a real boy, and this is blah, blah, blah. And so that's just kind of interesting. And they talk about like how the first, which is hilarious. I wouldn't know this, but other people might know that the first big whale story was Jonah getting swallowed by a whale in the Bible.
Hmm.
So that is kind of like the significance of the whale in Pinocchio is like the love and forgiveness and love and like you're going out on a limb to try to find somebody you love and you get swallowed by a whale. Way to go. But the real thing there is like you're seeking something that you always had. And
Okay.
like and so I think that's cute that what you just said of the forgive, like he's trying to like say sorry and be like, sorry, Dad, that I did all this. And he's like, you don't have to be. I've always had you the way you are. And, a really good love story in the end of it of a father and his son. But again, they had to make some sort of twist for us to all be interested. And the twist is he was a puppet, and all of a sudden the blue fairy comes back and grants the wish, right?
Mhm. So,
A happy ending and we get the beautiful song of all songs of Disney is When You Wish Upon a Star, and that's been redone and redone and redone, and even the new movie that we both talked about, the Wish movie that came out for the 100-year celebration, like movie complete crap. uh Wish song, just the wish, the real song is decent, decent enough for me to listen and be like, "Ah, I wish that song was kind of more just it," and I could relish the fact that Disney's 100 years had a good thing happen to it. But yeah,
They also had the audacity to have an end credit scene where the where the grandfather is playing on his guitar the "When You Wish Upon a Star." I'm like, come on, you're gonna make people wait for that.
I know. But the funny thing
That's
is
mean.
it could have been yeah, they had I don't know what that was, in all honesty. The movie
All right.
Wish is awful. Um,
We'll
but
go into a
they
full
were
review.
pulling, yeah, they were pulling from Pinocchio and stuff from this. Like that's one of the biggest like pivotal things in Disney is having the like feeling as though your dreams and wishes can come true. And then the Pinocchio is the prime start of that, which is really pretty and cool.
Yeah, I could see that. So honestly, with everything you've said, I definitely do have a deeper respect for like the morals and the message that they're trying to get across from that movie. However, I will still say that there's still quite a bit of issues that I have there where it's like from Snow White, I feel like this was a bit of a step down. So I'm going to tell you guys this that I'm actually going to be doing kind of like this ranking system kind of deal to where I will have, these movies that we talk about kind of ranked at the end. I'll probably reveal what I think are the top 10 that we talk about here. So right now, Snow White is still at the top. Pinocchio is definitely is second, but I definitely do, like I said, with my co-host giving that kind of more, deeper deal to it. It's like, okay, I can get that. I can get behind that. I just wish that some of these characters were not as, I don't want to say unlikable, but just not as, I guess, as bland as I kind of thought that they would be. Like,
Yeah, it's really like one of those things that it's a hard to watch thing. I don't like when you were telling me you were watching Pinocchio again, I was like, whoa. I don't think I have gotten zero. Isn't there even, oh my gosh, now that I think about it, didn't Tom Hanks do some sort of Pinocchio
he's in the
movie?
live action remake.
Oh my goodness, there's so many different. Like I was thinking of the 90s live action and like, oh no, they redid it even.
Oh, that's right.
Remember like they had like a
Jonathan
Pinocchio with
Taylor
like a
Thomas was in there. Yeah.
yes, with a hat and stuff. Like, yeah, crazy. Crazy. Sorry. Just I
And
was
then
like,
we
ah,
and then we also got Geppetto with Drew Carey.
oh my gosh. That is so crazy. All of
Oh,
that is so crazy. They have tried really hard on Pinocchio. Same
oh,
with Peter Pan too, though. That's one of
that
them.
is
I feel
also
like they've
true.
redone every like 6 years. They're like, we could try that again.
Why not do a different interpretation? Oh, I got
I
one more.
love Peter Pan.
Yeah. Oh, I got one more. So
What?
they also did a Pinocchio with Pauly Shore as Pinocchio.
Oh, what?
That face just told me what I needed to
Yeah,
know.
like no, not seeing that. That'll just be that's even creepier.
What, you don't like the guy from Goofy movie where he was just eating all that cheese? You don't think that he could be a great Pinocchio?
It's weird. I don't. What are we gonna learn from this man?
Um, that cheese is good, and even though he's not from Wisconsin, I'm pretty sure he just loves cheese. I think that's all we have.
That's
I think that's all we need.
all we need is as long as he likes cheese, we're down. We're down for it.
This is true.
Nice. But
But
yeah, but I agree with you. I wouldn't say that I think these movies have a place in history and that's why we're talking about them. But in general, I mean, I wouldn't sit my own kids down with them and be like, you're gonna love this movie. Like they're not. So whoops.
so Snow White, I think will be one that I would definitely show my kids. Pinocchio, no, no. I think it's one of those things where like when you're grown up and you feel like you're ready, go watch Pinocchio. But I
If you
I don't think
want.
if you want, I think that was actually going to be the last time I ever see Pinocchio because. Jesus, that was a trip and a half. Like I said, I am not looking forward to when we have to watch the live action one because I remember that being somehow worse. But we'll get to that one when we
Yeah, I
talk to
don't
that one.
know. I don't think I've ever seen that movie. So,
Well,
uh-oh.
we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But so yeah, like she said, in general, these two movies are definitely just amazing placeholders that started the golden age. And on the next episode, we're going to be talking about the final three notable. There we go. That's the word. Not,
I was like,
no,
notoriety?
notoriety. The three notable ones, which are going to conclude the golden age, which are going to be Fantasia. Jeez Louise. I guess
Ooh.
my body's rejecting it now. Fantasia, Dumbo, and Bambi. To which I'm going to be like, okay, this is going to be a interesting trip. I mean, I've watched Fantasia plenty of times, and honestly, I got a lot to say about that movie. Dumbo and Bambi, it's actually been a while since I've seen these two movies, so kind of interested to see how they kind of hold up
It's
for
pretty dark, man. It just gets darker.
that. That is also true, but also you
And
have to.
trippy. Are we gonna be taking drugs before we watch these movies, or do I have to watch them sober?
Considering the fact that I have a town called Merrill, which is basically like drug city, and we've both been to Rockford, which we
That's
have friends
funny.
in Rockford. We can make the joke, and they can also have a laugh about this because Rockford is I wouldn't say it's like the Chernobyl of Illinois, but it definitely is. It definitely is one of those places where it's like, wow, how does this place still exist?
You just called it the Chernobyl. That was fucking funny.
Only here on the Game Changer podcast can you hear about me to bring a Chernobyl joke into a podcast.
I didn't second it.
No, you didn't. You're just here for the ride, and she's just like,
I'm
I'm
there
just gonna get off the
laughing.
roller. I'm just gonna get off this roller
I'm gonna
coaster
be
right
like,
now.
shh, thumbs up.
All smiles and thumbs up. Guys, we are back, and this already is turning out to be one of the most bizarre, but also one of the most fun episodes I've done in podcasting in a while. So you can expect more in the future. Like we said, we're going through the eras of Disney. We're gonna get trippy. We're gonna get crazy. It's gonna be a wild time. So brace yourselves in. It's gonna be a bumpy ride.
You keep all hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times.
Unless you're in the bear jamboree, then you can just be like, "Hey, a talking bear."
Just
So
love it. I love it.
So we're going to wrap up this edition of the GCP. Thank you guys for listening in. You can always follow me on the Twitter and the Instagram at Real Effin' Game. Be sure to also check me out for Brace for Impact, a part of Wrestle Addict Radio, where I talk wrestling, TNA, and also independent wrestling. I've started doing that this week, and it's absolutely great, telling the stories that I can. And be also sure to check out every single thing that we post up on social media. It's always a lot of fun. Tori, where can they find you if they would like to just see what you're up to?
Yeah, I got to post because I went to Coachella and I haven't posted about it.
How
But
dare
but
you?
I know. I had such a fun time. Speaking of trips, right? Like, no. You can find me on Instagram. It's boss mode. Oh my goodness, Tori Clark underscore boss mode.
There you go.
Um, I know my handle. I know this. But yeah, the Instagram is kind of just where you'll find me right now, but it's where I should be posting stuff.
You should be. And honestly, guys, one of the funniest things that I'll tell you right now, it's really funny seeing Tori on her screen. Her hand keeps waving around, and it almost looks like there just comes a point where she looks like she's just flipping me off because the hand just goes blurry. I'm like,
Yeah, like
how dare you?
I feel like I have to not move. I feel like not moving causes the blur effect. Yeah,
There we
like
go.
yeah,
There
like
it is again.
Nate, stop talking about Pinocchio.
No more Pinocchio. No more pistachio. Okay, pistachio we can talk about, just not
Yeah,
Pinocchio.
pistachios. We like pistachios. They're okay.
From the pistachio lovers here at the GCP, thank you guys so much for listening in. Have a good one. We'll see you next time. We're concluding the golden age, and then we're going on from there. Toodles.
Bye.
Wait.